Admiral Lisa Kane stood on the bridge of the UES Titan and watched the large screens in front of her. The space around Earth looked peaceful, but she knew that would change very soon. Her hands gripped the metal rail as she stared at the dots of light moving toward their planet. These were not human ships. Captain Amy Foster sat at her station and checked the weapon systems for the 10th time that hour. Her fingers moved quickly over the control panel as she made sure everything was ready. She had trained for this moment her whole life, but never thought it would actually happen. The idea of aliens attacking Earth seemed like something from old movies. Amy looked up at the main screen and counted the enemy ships. There were more than 50 of them, and they were big, much bigger than anything humans had ever built. The ships looked strange, too. They were not made of metal like human ships, but seemed to be grown like plants. Their surfaces moved and pulsed like they were alive. On the alien flagship, Commander Velnara walked between the control stations and watched her crew prepare for battle. Her blue skin gleamed under the soft lights of the bridge, and her silver eyes reflected the glow from the screens. She wore a tight black uniform that showed her tall, thin frame. Like all women of her race, she was beautiful, in a way that seemed almost too perfect. Velnara had led many attacks on other worlds, and this one should be easy. Her scouts had told her that humans were weak and had poor technology. They lived on only one planet and barely traveled to their own moon. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered dozens of worlds with much stronger defenses than Earth could offer. Lieutenant Kirathes approached her commander and gave a small bow. Her green skin was darker than Velnara's blue, and her eyes were gold instead of silver. She was younger and less experienced, but very eager to prove herself in battle. This would be her first time leading ground troops on a new world. The attack plan was simple. The fleet would destroy Earth's satellites and any ships they found in space. Then they would land troops in the major cities and take control. Most species surrendered quickly when they saw how powerful the Zephyrian military was. Humans would probably do the same. Far below on Earth's surface, Lyra lay crouched on a high branch and looked up at the night sky. Her pointed ears picked up sounds that human ears could never hear, and her green eyes saw things in the darkness that would be invisible to others. She was an elf, and her people had lived in secret for thousands of years. The elves had watched human civilization grow from small tribes to great cities. They had seen wars and peace, and the slow development of technology. Most elves thought humans were too violent and destructive to be trusted. They preferred to stay hidden in their forests and mountains. But Lirelai was different from most of her people. She found humans interesting and had spent many nights watching their cities from far away. She had learned their languages and understood their ways better than any other elf. Now she saw lights in the sky that did not belong there. She closed her eyes and spoke words in the old elven language. Magic flowed through her, and suddenly she could see much farther than before. The lights in the sky became clear, and she gasped at what she saw. Ships filled with creatures from another world were coming to attack Earth. Lyrelai jumped down from the tree and ran through the forest faster than any human could move. She had to reach Elder Sylviana and tell her what was happening. The elves had always stayed out of human affairs, but this was different. If these sky creatures destroyed Earth, then the elves would die too. Back in space, the Zephyrian fleet moved into attack formation. Velnara stood in the center of her bridge and felt confident about the coming battle. Her ships had energy weapons that could cut through any armor and shields that could stop most attacks. The humans probably had nuclear weapons, but those were slow and easy to avoid. Admiral Kane watched the alien ships arrange themselves in a pattern she recognized from military training. They were preparing to attack, and there was no time left for negotiation. She had hoped that first contact with an alien race would be peaceful, but these creatures had come with weapons ready. She pressed a button on her command chair and spoke into her communicator. Her voice was calm but firm as she gave the order. That would change everything. All around Earth, hidden systems came online, and defensive platforms that had been waiting in secret began to move. Amy Foster smiled as her weapon systems showed ready status. The aliens thought they were attacking a weak and helpless planet, but they were very wrong. Humans had been preparing for this day for decades. Every major nation had contributed resources and technology to build Earth's defenses. The alien ships began to glow as they charged their weapons. Energy readings spiked on human sensors as the Zephyrians prepared to fire. Velnara raised her hand to give the attack order. She expected this battle to last only a few minutes. But as the first alien energy beams shot toward Earth, something unexpected happened. The planet that had seemed defenseless suddenly bristled with weapons. Massive guns emerged from hidden positions. On the moon and orbital platforms decloaked all around the enemy fleet. The aliens had walked into a trap, and they did not even know it yet. Humanity was about to show these invaders why Earth had never been conquered by anyone. Dr. Rebecca Stone sat deep underground in a room filled with computers and large screens. She had spent 20 years of her life designing the defense systems that were now coming online around Earth. Her fingers moved quickly over the control panel as she activated weapons that had been hidden for decades. The room around her buzzed with activity as dozens of technicians worked at their stations. Red lights flashed as the global defense network received power from fusion reactors buried even deeper in the mountain. Rebecca had dreamed of this moment, but also feared it. She hoped these weapons would never be needed. Above her head, massive doors opened in the lunar surface and cannon barrels emerged that were longer than city blocks. Orbital platforms that had been disguised as space junk suddenly unfolded into deadly weapon systems. Satellites that everyone thought were for communication revealed their true purpose as targeting systems locked onto the alien ships. Captain Helen Ross strapped herself into the pilot seat of her fighter and felt the engines come to life beneath her. The hangar around her was hidden inside what looked like a normal asteroid, but was actually a military base. Her ship was sleek and fast, with weapons designed specifically to fight in space. Helen had trained for this mission since she was 18 years old, but had never expected to actually use her skills against real aliens. The enemy ships were much larger than her fighter, but she knew that size was not everything in combat. Humans had learned long ago that speed and cleverness could beat raw power. She pressed the launch button, and her fighter shot out of the hidden base like a bullet. Around her, dozens of other pilots did the same thing. The human fleet was much smaller than the alien one, but every ship was crewed by people who had spent their entire lives preparing for this battle. On the alien flagship, Velnara watched in shock as the space around Earth suddenly filled with human weapons. Her sensors showed energy readings that should have been impossible for such a primitive species. The humans had been hiding their true capabilities, and now it was too late to retreat. The first exchange of fire lit up the darkness between Earth and the alien fleet. Zephyrian energy beams struck the orbital platforms, but found them protected by shields that could absorb tremendous amounts of power. Human railguns fired metal projectiles at speeds that turned them into pure energy when they hit their targets. Lieutenant Kirathes gripped her control station as the flagship shook from multiple impacts. The human weapons were different from anything the Zephyrians had encountered before. Instead of energy beams, the humans fired solid objects that punched through armor and exploded inside ships. Her beautiful face showed fear for the first time. Helen Ross dove her fighter between two alien cruisers and fired a spread of missiles at their engine sections. The human missiles were small but very smart. They could change direction and avoid defensive fire while seeking out the weakest points in enemy armor. Her targeting computer showed multiple hits as explosions bloomed along the alien hull. The Zephyrian ships tried to respond, but found themselves fighting an enemy that moved in ways they did not expect. Human fighters darted around the larger ships like angry insects and struck at critical systems. When the aliens tried to target them, the small ships would disappear behind asteroids or space debris. Deep in the forests of Earth, Lyralai had reached the ancient grove where Elder Sylviana lived. The old elf sat in meditation beneath a tree that was older than human civilization. Her white hair glowed with inner light, and her ancient eyes held wisdom that spanned thousands of years. Lyralai knelt before her elder and spoke quickly about what she had seen in the sky. Elder Sylviana listened without interruption, then stood and walked to a pool of clear water. She placed her hands above the surface, and the water began to show images of the battle happening in space. The two elves watched as human and alien ships fought among the stars. Elder Sylviana had seen many wars during her long life, but this was different. The fate of their world hung in the balance, and for the first time in centuries, the elves might have to break their ancient vow of isolation. Captain Moonwhisper arrived, at the grove with a dozen elven warriors. They wore armor made from living wood and carried weapons that seemed to be grown rather than forged. Like all elves, they moved with grace that made no sound, and their eyes held the cold light of starfire. The elf captain bowed to Elder Sylviana and asked for permission to act. Some alien ships had been damaged and were falling toward Earth. If they crashed in populated areas, many humans would die. The elves had the power to guide the falling ships to empty areas, but doing so would reveal their existence. In space, the battle continued to rage, but the tide was clearly turning. Human weapons proved far more effective than anyone had expected, while alien defenses crumbled under the coordinated assault. Velnara realized that her intelligence about human capabilities had been completely wrong. Dr. Stone watched the tactical display and felt both pride and sadness. The defense systems were working exactly as designed, but she knew that many people were dying on both sides. She had always hoped that humanity's first contact with aliens would be peaceful, but these creatures had chosen war. Amy Foster coordinated the orbital defense platforms and watched as they systematically destroyed one alien ship after another. The human weapons had been designed by studying every military conflict in human history. They combined the best ideas from thousands of years of warfare into systems that were almost unstoppable. Helen Ross led her squadron in an attack on the alien flagship and smiled grimly as her missiles found their target. The huge ship was tough, but even it could not survive the concentrated fire from dozens of human fighters. Explosions raced along its hull as critical systems failed one after another. Velnara felt her ship dying around her and knew that the battle was lost. In less than 2 hours, the mighty Zephyrian fleet had been reduced to scattered wreckage. The humans had not just defended their world, they had completely destroyed an invasion force that should have been able to conquer any planet. As more alien ships fell from the sky, Elder Sylviana made a decision that would change the world forever. The elves could no longer remain hidden when the very survival of Earth was at stake. She gave Captain Moonwhisper permission to reveal their existence and use their magic to help save lives. The war that was supposed to subjugate humanity had instead revealed that Earth was protected by forces the aliens had never imagined. But this was only the beginning of something much larger than anyone realized. Lieutenant Kirathes crawled through the twisted metal of her escape pod and felt pain shoot through her left arm. The pod had crashed hard into a forest somewhere on the human planet, and most of her equipment was damaged. Her gold eyes scanned the trees around her looking for threats, but she saw only green leaves and strange earth plants. She tried to contact her ship, but got only static from her communicator. The human attack had been so sudden and devastating that most of the Zephyrian fleet was destroyed before they could organize a proper defense. Kirathes had never imagined that such a primitive species could fight with such deadly skill. As she struggled to stand up, she heard footsteps approaching through the forest. Her hand moved to her sidearm, but she hesitated when she realized the steps were too light to belong to a human soldier. Something else lived in these woods and was coming to investigate the crash. Lyrelay moved silently between the trees and studied the strange metal object that had fallen from the sky. She could smell the alien scent and hear movement inside the wreckage. Her elven senses told her that whoever was inside was injured and alone. Despite her caution, she felt curiosity about this being from another world. When she saw the Zephyrian woman emerge from the pod, Lyrelay gasped in surprise. The alien was beautiful in a way that seemed almost magical with her green skin and golden eyes. But she was also clearly hurt and far from any help. Lyrelay made a decision that went against all elven traditions about staying hidden. She stepped out from behind a tree and spoke in the human language she had learned. Her voice was soft and musical as she offered to help the injured alien. Kirathes spun around in shock and stared at the pointed-eared woman who had appeared like a forest spirit. The two females looked at each other across a small clearing, and both felt the same sense of wonder. Neither had ever seen anything like the other before. Lyrelay had only heard stories about beings from other worlds, while Kirathes had never encountered any species that looked so much like the Zephyrians, but was clearly not from space. Dr. Rebecca Stone sat in her underground command center and listened to the alien communications that her computers had managed to decode. Most of the messages were military reports about the battle, but some were more personal. She was surprised to learn that many of the aliens had not wanted to attack Earth at all. The translation software revealed that the Zephyrian Empire was facing a crisis on their home world. Their planet was dying from pollution and resource depletion, and they needed new places for their people to live. The invasion of Earth had been ordered by their emperor, but many of the soldiers had doubts about attacking innocent people. Rebecca realized that this conflict might not have to end in the complete destruction of the alien race. If the Zephyrians were desperate refugees rather than conquering monsters, then perhaps there could be another solution. She began to prepare a report for Admiral Kane about what she had discovered. Colonel Patricia Wright led a squad of human soldiers through the wreckage of an alien cruiser that had crashed near a major city. Her team was trained in first aid and had orders to take prisoners, rather than kill any survivors they found. The massive ship had torn a deep gash in the earth when it fell, but most of the crew seemed to have survived the impact. Inside the ship, Patricia found Commander Velnara, trapped under a fallen beam in what had been the bridge. The alien woman was conscious but could not move, and her blue skin was pale from blood loss. Patricia could have simply captured her, but instead she called for medics to treat the alien's injuries. Velnara looked up at the human colonel with surprise and confusion. She had expected to be executed or tortured, but instead, the humans were helping her. Patricia's face was stern but not cruel, as she explained that Earth forces did not kill helpless prisoners. This was not how Velnara had been told humans would behave. In the forest, Lyralay used her knowledge of healing to treat Kirithes's injured arm. The alien woman watched in amazement as the elf spoke words in an ancient language and made plants grow to provide medicine. Magic was something the Zephyrians had heard about but never seen, and Kirithes felt wonder at this display of power over nature. As Lyralay worked, she asked questions about why the aliens had come to Earth. Kirithes found herself explaining about the dying world and the desperate search for new homes. She had never questioned the Emperor's orders before, but now she wondered if there might have been a better way than war. The elf listened with growing understanding and sympathy. Her people had also faced environmental destruction long ago and had learned to live in harmony with nature instead of fighting against it. She began to see that the Zephyrians were not evil monsters, but frightened refugees who had made a terrible mistake. Elder Sylviana emerged from her grove and used her magic to contact other elven communities around the world. For the first time, in 1,000 years, the hidden people would reveal themselves to both humans and aliens. The crisis was too great for the elves to remain isolated any longer. Captain Moonwhisper and her warriors used their nature magic to guide falling alien ships away from populated areas. Human news reports showed mysterious forces that seemed to push the crashing vessels toward empty fields and forests. The humans did not understand what was happening, but they were grateful for the help. Admiral Kane received Dr. Stone's report about the alien communications and felt a mixture of relief and concern. If the Zephyrians were truly desperate refugees, then Earth might be able to help them without more bloodshed. But she also knew that many humans would want revenge for the attack and would not trust alien promises. Colonel Wright sat across from Commander Velnara in a military hospital and tried to understand the alien perspective. The Zephyrian commander was still weak from her injuries, but she spoke honestly about her people's situation. Her silver eyes showed regret as she admitted that the invasion had been a mistake. Velnara had expected humans to be weak and cowardly, but instead she found them to be strong and honorable. Even after being attacked, they were willing to treat their enemies with respect. She began to wonder if her people could learn something from these remarkable beings. In the forest clearing, Lyralay and Kirithes sat by a small fire and shared food while they talked. The alien woman had never tasted earth plants before and was surprised by how good they were. The elf explained how her people had learned to take only what they needed from nature and always give something back. As night fell, Elder Sylviana made her way to the crash site, guided by Lyralay's mental call. The ancient elf wanted to meet this being from the stars and learn about her people. Perhaps the elves could help prevent more bloodshed by acting as mediators between humans and aliens. The battle in space was over, but the real challenge was just beginning. 3 very different species now had to find a way to understand each other and work together. The future of all 3 races might depend on whether they could turn their differences into strengths instead of sources of conflict. President Karen Miller walked into the most important meeting of her life aboard the captured Zephyrian flagship that now floated in Earth's orbit. The alien ship was massive, and its biomechanical design made her feel like she was inside a living creature rather than a machine. Strange lights pulsed through the walls, and the air hummed with unfamiliar energy. Admiral Kane stood beside the president and felt nervous despite her military training. This meeting would determine whether Earth faced years of war or found a path to peace. Behind them walked Dr. Stone, carrying data tablets filled with translation programs and scientific analysis of alien technology. Commander Velnara waited in the ship's main conference room with her remaining officers. Her blue skin had regained some color since her injuries were treated, but her silver eyes still showed the pain of defeat. She wore a simple white robe instead of her military uniform to show that she came in peace. The most surprising attendees were Elder Sylviana and Lyralay, who had teleported onto the ship using elven magic. The aliens stared in wonder at these pointed-eared beings who could appear and disappear at will. Velnara had thought humans were the only intelligent species on Earth, but now she realized how little her people really knew about this world. President Miller took her seat at the large conference table and looked around at the assembled group. She had led her country through many crises, but nothing had prepared her for negotiating with aliens and magical elves. The translator devices hummed softly as they converted speech between human English Elvish and the Zephyrian language. Velnara began by formally surrendering what remained of her fleet and accepting responsibility for the attack on Earth. Her voice was steady, but her words carried deep regret as she explained that she had been following orders from the Zephyrian Emperor. She had not questioned whether the invasion was right or wrong until she saw how humans fought to defend their home. Dr. Stone activated a holographic display that showed images of the Zephyrian home world. The planet looked beautiful from space, with blue oceans and green continents, but the surface images revealed a different story. Dead forests covered vast areas where industrial pollution had killed all plant life. Cities were surrounded by walls to keep out toxic storms that raged across poisoned lands. The Zephyrian engineer Valnessa spoke about her planet's environmental collapse with tears in her large violet eyes. Her people had built a great civilization but had destroyed their world in the process. The Emperor believed that conquering other planets was the only way to save the Zephyrian race from extinction. Elder Sylviana listened to the aliens' story with growing understanding. Her own people had faced similar problems thousands of years ago when they lived in great cities and used powerful magic without thinking about the consequences. The elves had learned to live in harmony with nature, but only after they nearly destroyed themselves. Lyralai translated between the different languages and cultures, helping everyone understand each other better. She had spent time with both humans and Zephyrians and could see that all three species had valuable knowledge to share. The elf woman felt excited about the possibility of bringing different worlds together in friendship. President Miller asked the crucial question about whether the Zephyrian people would accept a peaceful solution. Velnara admitted that many of her people were tired of war and would welcome an alternative to endless conquest. The Emperor was old and stubborn, but he was not immortal, and younger Zephyrians were beginning to question his methods. Admiral Kane presented intelligence reports showing that other alien races in the galaxy were also suffering from environmental problems. The Zephyrian Empire had been conquering world after world, but never solving the real problem. Each new planet was eventually destroyed by the same industrial processes that had poisoned their home world. Dr. Stone revealed the most important discovery of the negotiations. Her analysis of Zephyrian technology showed that they possessed incredible terraforming abilities that could transform dead worlds into gardens. Combined with elven knowledge of environmental magic and human industrial capabilities, they could restore damaged planets instead of destroying new ones. Elder Sylviana made an offer that surprised everyone in the room. The elves would share their ancient knowledge of environmental restoration, but only if all three species worked together as equals. She had seen too many civilizations destroy themselves through greed and short-sightedness and would not allow that to happen again. Valnessa became excited as she realized what the elder was proposing. Zephyrian biotechnology could accelerate plant growth and purify contaminated soil, while elven magic could guide the process and ensure balance. Human engineering could provide the infrastructure needed to support large populations during the restoration process. The discussion turned to practical matters as the leaders tried to work out details of cooperation. Earth had large areas of desert and wasteland that could be terraformed into new homes for Zephyrian refugees. In return, the aliens would help restore damaged Earth ecosystems and share their advanced technology. Lyrelay and Lieutenant Kirathes sat together at one end of the table and represented the growing friendship between their peoples. The young Zephyrian had learned much about Earth during her time in the forest with the elf, and now served as an advocate for peaceful cooperation within her own military. President Miller worried about how her people would react to having alien neighbors, but Admiral Kane pointed out that the alternative was years of destructive war. The human military had won the first battle, but a long conflict would cost millions of lives on both sides. Peace was not just morally right, but strategically necessary. Velnara promised to contact other Zephyrian commanders and convince them to join the peace negotiations. Many of her people were loyal to her personally and would follow her lead especially, after seeing how decisively humans had defeated their invasion force. The Emperor was far away and could not stop local commanders from making their own choices. Elder Sylviana made it clear that the elves would not remain hidden any longer. They had spent too long watching other species make the same mistakes while doing nothing to help. The environmental crisis was too serious for any race to face alone, and only cooperation could prevent future disasters. Dr. Stone began planning joint research projects that would combine the knowledge of all three species. Zephyrian biotechnology could be used to clean up pollution, while elven magic guided the restoration of natural ecosystems. Human industry could provide the tools and infrastructure needed to support large-scale environmental projects. As the meeting progressed, the former enemies began to see each other as potential allies. Velnara admired human determination and courage, while President Miller respected the alien commander's willingness to admit mistakes and seek a better path. Elder Sylviana saw hope for both younger species if they could learn from elven wisdom. Tatusi. Negotiations lasted for many hours as the three species worked out the framework for an unprecedented alliance. There would be challenges and setbacks, but for the first time in generations, the future looked bright for all of them. The war that had threatened to destroy Earth was becoming the foundation for a new age of cooperation and peace. Admiral Lisa Kane stood on the observation deck of the orbital station and watched the most amazing sight she had ever seen. Below her stretched the Australian continent, where vast areas of red desert were slowly turning green. Massive terraforming. Machines worked alongside elven druids and human engineers to transform the barren wasteland into fertile farmland. 6 months had passed since the failed Zephyrian invasion, and the world had changed in ways no one could have imagined. The former enemies now worked side by side on projects that would have taken centuries for any single species to complete. The combination of human determination, alien technology, and elven wisdom was creating miracles on a daily basis. Commander. Velnara walked through the new settlement that her people were building in what had once been empty desert. The biomechanical structures grew from the ground like living trees and provided homes for thousands of Zephyrian refugees. Her silver eyes showed wonder as she watched human children playing with young aliens while elven teachers shared lessons about living in harmony with nature. The Zephyrian commander had been promoted to ambassador after she convinced most of her people to accept the peace agreement. Many alien ships had arrived at Earth carrying not weapons, but families desperate for a new home. The Emperor on the distant homeworld still refused to accept the new alliance, but his power was fading as more Zephyrians chose cooperation over conquest. Dr. Rebecca Stone worked in a laboratory that would have been impossible just months before. Human computers processed data alongside Zephyrian bioprocessors, while elven crystals provided magical enhancement to both systems. The combination of 3 different approaches to science was advancing knowledge at an incredible rate. Her latest project involved using alien terraforming technology to restore the Amazon rainforest and other damaged ecosystems on Earth. The Zephyrians had machines that could purify soil and water while accelerating plant growth. Elven magic guided the process to ensure that new growth was balanced and sustainable. Captain Amy Foster now commanded a joint fleet of human, elven, and Zephyrian ships that explored the solar system looking for new worlds to terraform. Her flagship was a hybrid design that combined the best features of all three technologies. The ship could travel faster than any human vessel while being more environmentally friendly than traditional Zephyrian craft. Amy had learned to work with crews that included humans from many nations, elves from hidden communities around the world, and Zephyrians from dozens of different colonies. The diversity sometimes caused problems, but it also provided solutions that no single species could have found alone. Captain Helen Ross led training missions that taught human pilots to fly Zephyrian bioships while alien pilots learned to handle human fighters. The exchange of knowledge went both ways as each species discovered new approaches to space travel and combat. Helen found that alien ships were more intuitive to fly, while human vessels offered better precision and control. In the forests of the Pacific Northwest, Lyralai and Lieutenant Kirathes walked hand in hand along paths that only elves had used for thousands of years. Their friendship had grown into something deeper as they learned to understand each other's cultures. The alien woman was amazed by the elf's connection to nature, while Lyralai was fascinated by stories of life among the stars. Elder Sylviana had established a council that included representatives from all three species and served as the governing body for joint projects. The ancient elf found it satisfying to finally put her wisdom to use, helping younger races avoid the mistakes that had nearly destroyed her own people in the distant past. The Tri-Species Council met regularly to coordinate everything from trade agreements to exploration missions. Decisions were made by consensus rather than force, and all three species had equal voices in planning their shared future. It was not always easy to reach agreement, but the results were far better than anything any single race could have achieved. Captain Moonwhisper led mixed teams of human soldiers, alien warriors, and elven guards who provided security for the joint settlements. The elf warrior had been suspicious of both humans and aliens at first, but now she valued the different skills that each species brought to protecting their communities. Engineer Val Nessa worked with human and elven scientists to design new types of spacecraft that could support crews from all three species. The ships needed to provide Earth-like atmosphere for humans while also accommodating Zephyrian biology and elven magical practices. The challenge led to innovations that benefited everyone. President Karen Miller addressed the United Nations and announced that Earth would be sending its first tri-species mission to the stars. The exploration vessel, UES Harmony, would carry equal numbers of humans, elves, and Zephyrians to search for other worlds that could be terraformed. More importantly, they would look for other intelligent species that might need help or could contribute to the growing alliance. The ship itself was a masterpiece of cooperative engineering. Human industrial techniques had built the basic structure, while Zephyrian biotechnology provided living systems that could repair themselves and adapt to changing conditions. Elven magic was woven throughout the ship to protect the crew and enhance their connection to the natural forces of space. Admiral Kane felt proud as she watched the Harmony prepare for launch from the orbital shipyard. The vessel represented everything that the three species could accomplish when they worked together instead of fighting. She had spent her career preparing for war, but now she was helping to build a peaceful future. Dr. Stone checked the ship's systems one final time before launch. The Harmony carried not just explorers, but also the hopes and dreams of three entire species. If the mission succeeded, it would prove that cooperation was stronger than conflict and might inspire other races to join their alliance. Velnara served as the ship's diplomatic officer and looked forward to making contact with new civilizations. Her experience with the failed invasion had taught her that understanding was more valuable than conquest. She hoped to find other species that could benefit from what the Earth Alliance had learned about working together. Elder Sylviana blessed the ship with ancient elven magic and watched as it departed for the stars. She had lived long enough to see her people emerge from isolation and join with others to build something greater than any of them could create alone. The future was uncertain, but it was full of possibilities that would have been impossible just months before. Lyralai and Kirathes stood together in the ship's observation lounge and watched Earth fall away behind them. The elf had never imagined that she would travel to the stars while the alien woman was returning to space, but as part of a peaceful mission rather than a military operation. Their love had become a symbol of what the three species could accomplish, together. As the Harmony jumped to faster than light speed and headed for distant stars, its crew carried with them the knowledge that they were not just explorers, but ambassadors for a new way of living. The alliance between humans, elves, and Zephyrians had turned a war into the beginning of a peaceful galactic civilization. The attack on Earth had been intended to end human independence, but instead, it had created something that none of the three species could have built alone. The future was bright with promise and full of wonders that awaited discovery among the stars.